everybody out there in La La Land watching us today. This is Pastor Dave Bryan at the Church of Glad Tidings in Yuba City. And I have a wonderful, wonderful friend of mine as a guest with us today, and that's the inimitable, the one, the only, Dr. David Martin. David, thank you for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule. And I just want to welcome you back to Time to Roar. I wish you were here at Glad Tidings with me, as you've been many times. But anyway, where are you at? Are you in Utah today?
Yeah, I am in Utah, and as you can see on my my Zoom account, I'm actually misidentified as Stanford. I'm using Stan Graham's computer, so for the next hour, I'm going to be Stan Graham. How about that? A lot
Okay.
less hair, a lot less hair, and
a lot less than Stanford. Yeah. Well, what have you been up to? They're working on RASA Energy, probably. Huh?
Yes, we are indeed, and today we had the wonderful opportunity to put some ground that was prophesied over in 1898.
Wow.
So only 127 years ago. And we put it in the machine today, our second day of creation machine. And out came clean sand and pure oil and pure water.
Wow. Wow.
And so I just got done reproducing in 2025 on the 4th of April here, as we are on the edge of celebrating Passover.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to experience what it's like to hit a rock and have stuff come out of it.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Now, David, are you using the second day machine that I saw down in California, or are you
let's
using
just say
the big boy?
it's a little bigger than the one you saw.
I thought so.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's
what size is it?
it's kind of the mid tier, the really big machine that we have brought in from Korea, engineered in Korea and manufactured over there. The big machine is on the ground there. It's installed, but it is going through some let's just say some of the shakedown crews, as they say in the Navy, where you go out, find what breaks, and find out what wasn't done exactly right. So it's doing its shakedown right now, but we'll have it going pretty soon. So yeah, so this spring is bearing fruit, and the first of our material has actually been purchased and used. And when people drive down highways, they'll be driving on clean asphalt, and when they put fuel in their vehicles, they're going to be having clean fuel. And so yeah, I mean, and it's funny, Dave, I have this little reference that's worth highlighting, because how I always love to put prophecies as far back as they go in line with what's happening right now. And it seems appropriate during this conversation that we kind of land, something that, as you know, I named the company after Isaiah 35:1 and 2. The desert will rejoice and blossom as a rose. That beautiful reference out of Isaiah 35. And this is from a very different document, so maybe a little less auspicious. This was the Salt Lake Herald in 1898. And in the Salt Lake Herald in 1898, they said, and I'm quoting from the last sentence of the article, "A circle of undeveloped wealth engirdles northeastern Utah that will at some future day extend its fame to the uttermost portions of the earth."
Wow, David, that's awesome.
I kind of thought uttermost portions. That sounds like a pretty decent thing to put in a prophecy in 1898. And we made it happen today. So it was a good day.
That sounds like a good day.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. And it's always good to hear a report of how you're doing with the second day machine and RASA Energy and how that's coming along. Is there soon to be a more public portrayal of what you're doing? Or,
Yeah, we were very fortunate. There's some folks now in Washington who are slightly more aligned to the idea that maybe energy independence is a good thing for America.
yeah,
And that's a great thing to think about, but it's unfortunate that most people don't have a frame of reference about how we're going to go about doing that. And the good news is we're not guessing, or we're doing it. And so that has drawn some attention of some fairly noteworthy individuals, and some of them came out and paid us a visit a few weeks ago. They've decided to kick it up the food chain to some even more notables, and so yeah, the wheels are moving, and
yeah,
as you know, Dave, the one thing that I can count on is I wake up every morning. I know which way the sun rises. I know which way I salute every morning, and I get done what's in front of me to get done. And
yeah,
I'm very grateful that this persistence has paid off. So it's
yeah.
very good.
Well, that's awesome. And you know this, but I just want to say again, we pray for you often.
Thank you.
And you got a great uh, pep club here from the Church of Glad
Yeah.
Tidings.
Well, and I'll be out there, and I have to say, shout out to Jill, because I was wearing my IS-35 one hat today that she sent
There
me.
you go.
So
That's
there you go.
awesome.
A little props to Jill and Gary.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
yeah, it's a good day.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see you again. It's been a while,
It
and
has been.
I really appreciate you logging on. Let's hear from you, David. I know that you're busy and have your notes to the grandson, but I also know that you're one of the more informed human beings on the planet. And give me just an overview of what you think's happening in the United States these days with the turnaround in government and where we're at. Just you can take that any direction you'd like,
Yeah,
but
well, I threatened that I would do this sometime, and we are going to do it on the ground in Yuba City when we've got chickens running around, and we've got the appropriate amount of roosters.
yeah,
Um,
there you go.
but Dave, I mentioned a little while ago that there are two concepts that particularly people of faith have blurred over the last at least 1,000 years, probably 2,000 years.
Yeah.
But those two concepts are the difference between apostolic and messianic worldviews.
Ah,
And one of the things that happens when we see darkness is we see the evidence of at least a flicker of light. And a lot of times we can look at a flicker of light and mistake it for light. Now, what we don't know, and that's the tragedy of it, is we don't know whether that light is in fact true light. Is it reflected light? Is it, a false light? There's all kinds of lights it can be.
sure.
But when you're seeing darkness, anything that appears to be light can sometimes evoke within us a sense of, man, now we've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, what that gives rise to is what I call a messianic view, which is people are saying, and there's going to be a thing that's going to save us. There's going to be a thing that's going to do it. And what it does, and this is the sad part, is it makes a certain degree of complacency almost authorized or expected. Like, hey, the Savior's coming, so I don't have to do
Right.
my thing. And that worldview stands in stark contrast to what I call the apostolic view, which is to say, how do I live in a way? The metaphor in the New Testament is the virgins who keep watch.
Right.
Keep your lights burning, keep the wicks trimmed, keep the oil there. How do I live in a way where I'm not waiting for, but I'm actively engaged in doing what is right, and I am doing it in a way that invites other people to light the light within themselves, So what we're
Beautiful,
doing is actually not waiting for the hero, but we are anticipating the emergence of light within all of us, because maybe it's as important that the lights are lighting the bridegroom's way home as it is that they're there to celebrate the bridegroom when he gets there. And I think part of our challenge is we've been so addicted to this messianic story of there's going to be a day when everything just magically gets sorted out. And I think sometimes we miss the apostolic discipline, the apostolic calling that says, no, it's not wait for someday, and it's not wait for something, it's not wait for a hero. It's actually be audacious enough to believe that just as we wait with great anticipation, the transformation of the age, which is true and it's wonderful and it's beautiful, but maybe our role to hold the light is as important as the return of the light. And if we don't understand those two things, I think sometimes we think, well, you know what, somebody else is going to do it. And that somebody else may be a pastor like you. It may be, a charismatic personality, and it may be the return of Jesus. Like, it could be anything. But if you're feeling right now like the right thing to do is sit on the couch and watch Fox News and just wait for the announcement of a white horse that arrived, you're probably not doing what you're called to do. Because I don't think anybody was called to sit on a sofa cushion. So I'll give you an example. I was at an event, a beautiful ceremony where there was a change of command of a very important part of the United States Navy a few days ago. And at that event, I was sitting there watching all the beautiful ceremony, the pomp, the flags, the guns, the flyovers, the, really beautiful ceremony, celebrating patriotism. And in a speech, there was one half of a sentence that was said that I don't think anybody else heard. But one of the senior officers in the Navy said that under this particular individual's command, and I'm now quoting from the speech, he needs to ready himself for a global war of peers by 2027.
A global war of peers by 2027.
What does that mean? Well, let's take that sentence apart. That means that at a public event that was an honorary, beautiful ceremony, just slipped in right in front of the whole audience, sounded like something that should have sent off at least a ship captain's bell somewhere.
Yeah.
To go, oh, whoa, hold on a second, pump the brakes. What did you just say? Yeah. A global war of peers in 2027. Now, I don't know. I'm not reading into that. I'm not putting on the soothsayer's hat, trying to divine some sort of, entrails analysis of a chicken that I sacrificed there. I'm actually just listening to what the guy said.
Yeah.
And when I listen to that and I hear those words and I go, oh, did he just tell us something?
Yeah. Sounds like it.
And so here's the problem. The problem is if I am, once again, in that messianic view, I'm going to go, man, I hope somebody's taking care of that.
Yeah. Right.
And if I'm in the apostolic point of view, I'm going to go, what's my role?
Right.
Why was I in that meeting at that event hearing those words? Why did Dave Martin hear that? Well, the answer is because Dave Martin, through a series of very interesting life stories, has the ability to pick up these little signals that come up and actually has the ability to influence the outcome.
Yeah.
Now, there's people that would say, well, so are you thinking you're the hero? No, I'm just being Dave Martin. I'm just being the guy who was sitting in the room, heard somebody say something, and now I feel like I've just been called to attention. What does that mean? I feel like if there is a group of people who thinks that in 2027 we're having a global war of peers, and what that means is superpowers, a clash of the titans. That's what it
Yeah.
means.
Yeah.
I think that if we are being told that there's a group of people who want a global war in 2027, then maybe it'd be a good idea for us to do some things to disrupt that plan
Right.
and offer an alternative. And so that's
Right.
where I think that apostolic view is so important, where you get information, you're aware, you stay attentive, you stay watchful. If
Right.
it's a half a sentence in a speech, you listen to that.
Yeah.
And you look for those things. You know, it was called in what we refer to as the Old Testament, the still small voice.
Right.
In the churches that I grew up in, they used to call it the unction, and I always
Yeah.
loved that word, the unction. I'm not sure exactly why they had to use that word, and I'm not sure most people knew what unctioning was. Um, Sounds like something you auction off when you're drunk, but but um, but unction, you know, what was that? That was the stirring. It was the thing that's supposed to wake you up, and so I think there's a lot that's there to wake us up, and I think it's there not to wake us up so we send out a Twitter feed. I think it's to wake us up so we get off the couch and do something.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that insight, and I couldn't agree with you more. For every person that gets out there and does something, there are thousands that sit back and watch and
Yeah.
generally criticize
Oh yeah.
while they're watching. Always quick to say why it would, it shouldn't happen that way, or it couldn't happen, or it won't happen
Yeah.
while they're twiddling their thumbs. But I wanted to talk to you particularly today about one problem that I know you and I have talked about that is a worldwide problem. And for reasons that I'll never quite understand, a lot of people seem hesitant to talk about it or to confront it. And that's child trafficking, worldwide child trafficking.
Yeah.
And as you know, David, we've embarked on a plan to try to help not only locally, but try to build something locally that will become an inspiration for people to replicate it in hopefully every major city in the world, because that's where
Yeah.
the problem reaches.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a piece of heaven. It's a children's paradise. And we're trying to buy 10 acres north of us here. And what I'm running into, uh, as you well know that I would, is people that are saying, yeah, we know there's a problem, but what gives you the right to do something about it, as if you need some kind of a license to do what is honorable.
Yeah.
But the other thing, David, is what makes it your business. But then people that are saying, well, you can't help because you're in California. California won't allow that to happen. And I've had a number of those conversations recently. One with a woman that was a former employee of the Department of Defense, and she was a nice woman, albeit she had lost. I assume she lost it, but anyway, in the conversation I had with her, she seemed to lack hope
Yeah.
for the future.
Yeah.
And I think that, in my mind, is the result of working in and around bureaucracies that really just suck the hope out of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, that was her concept, is like, well, California won't let you do that. And I found myself saying, I don't doubt at all that there aren't, or I don't doubt that there are people in California bureaucracy and the government that will try to stop us. But why should we worry about that? And why should we allow that to hinder what we know to be a good thing? Why
Right.
not rather just forge forward and deal with it as it comes up? And, I, of course, believe in the promises of Scripture, but one of them is if God is with you, no one can withstand you, right?
Yep.
You got God
Yep.
on your side.
Yep.
But anyway, I know that you have been a David and faced Goliaths, not only in the United States, but in a number of different settings. And
Yeah.
so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in on this David and Goliath challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
So,
so
so
what think ye of our fight?
yeah, no, listen. So let's take it apart a couple ways, right? Because I like to get into the roots of things.
Yeah,
So let's first talk about trafficking of children. Um, tragically, as I've shared with you about this. I got involved in many of the activities across, particularly the Pacific, Australia, Pacific Islands, parts of the rest of the world, where I inadvertently found myself having to deal with a number of scandals where the harm that was being done to children was being done in churches.
yeah,
And I want to start with that because that's the giant kind of a bit of a stinking turd in the fishbowl.
right, right.
The problem we have is that inside of what most of us call faith, religion, or our belief system, we have done a terrible job of shaming and hiding sexuality as a human phenomenon.
Mm,
We find it awkward to talk about. We find it awkward to do all kinds of things about. And what that means is that the concept of sexuality is by definition hidden from conversation.
yeah,
And anytime you do anything that's hidden, and I want to be really precise about this, everything that's done in the dark gives rise to more darkness. It just does. So,
yeah,
as much as people want to say, well, it's an out there, somebody else, there's bad people doing bad things problem. Part of what the problem is our inability to talk in a healthy way about the way in which things have been suppressed and oppressed to the point where people turn to perversions and they turn to extraordinary behaviors because they don't have the capacity to have honest conversations that are open and transparent and full of possibility, right? So I'll start because you have to take a look at your own life, right? So let's start with my life. I grew up in an environment where sexuality was, constantly spoken about as evil. People use Jesus's language. If you look at a woman with lust in your eyes, you've already committed adultery. And that was the evidence of why you shouldn't go to the beach to see somebody in a swimsuit, right?
yeah,
Now, I don't think Jesus said don't go swimming. I'm pretty
yeah.
sure that's not what he was saying.
Pretty sure.
What he was saying was don't allow the spirit of lust to make you try to take which is not right and appropriate for you. That's the case.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm just going to say, as a man, and I'm almost 58, I can tell you right now that the programming that I got from the church was so robust and so perverted that when I actually, for the vast majority of my life, looked at my wife, who is my wife, I still had a voice in my head saying, well, don't look at her like that.
Yeah.
Now what is that? That's a manipulation of the created order. That is a perversion of the truth. And I'm not suggesting that that's the fault and the cause and everything else, but I am saying that if a person like me, who's lived what I try to be as faithful a life as I can, right, that I know how to do, if I have a problem looking at my own wife without having the hit play in the back of my head, the little voice go, well, you can't look at her like that. You can't think that, right?
Yeah.
And it's my wife, right?
Yeah.
Think about what I just said. That's the appropriate place to have these kinds of relationships.
Right. Absolutely.
I got brainwashed and I got literally beaten this into my head that was wrong, right? So let's start with, we've got some accountability. And I think as a community of faith, we have some repentance to do about how we decided to turn shame and sexuality into the proof that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And I mean, how many times has that been the subtext of you are a shameful person because you have natural responses to the opposite sex, right?
Yeah.
The church has to clean up its act on that. And it
Yeah.
has to get to a point where men and women can speak publicly and honestly and transparency about their joys and their challenges when it comes to that. So let's
Yeah.
start with that. Foundation's broken.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
now we're gonna move into the next piece, which is the bad part about that is inside of that broken foundation, the house that's built on that broken foundation doesn't give room for people who are struggling to cope in a healthy way. So what happens, and this is not now just the church, this is society in general. What happens is people find themselves drawn into perversions because they find themselves increasingly shamed, increasingly harmed, and they get on this very bizarre, slippery slope of, well, I've already done that, so how bad is the next thing? And so what happens is this downward spiral that's cascading, and like every form of perversion, the little bit that starts becomes the bigger bit, the bigger bit, the bigger bit.
Right.
And unfortunately, shame fueling the fall accelerates the fall.
Yeah.
So we need to come up with a way to help people recover from shame before it metastasizes into abuse.
Yeah.
That's the second piece. Now let's talk about the third piece. When you feel like you are unattractive, undesired, incapable of living a proper life, it is highly likely that you're going to look to somebody who you think is disempowered as the way in which you are going to finally have something you can control. And this is where, tragically, many women and many children find themselves at the receiving end of a cruel and insensitive man, in most instances, man who, because they want to dominate something, because they don't have a sense of any form of self-control or effectiveness in their own life, they decide to find somebody that they can kick downward on. They want to be able to oppress or repress something.
Right.
Because they feel already small, shamed, and inadequate. And so they try to find someone who is weaker,
Right.
so that they can feel strong.
Right.
Tragically, that's what ultimately spirals, as we've seen in many of these, the Catholic Church sex scandals, stuff that I was very involved in the Pacific. That's what we see in almost every one of these cases. The people who are already broken, already shamed, already at their own internal struggle of shame, ultimately need to find something that they can abuse because they themselves are at the end of their sense of having any power over their own.
Right.
So as we look at the anatomy of how the problem happens, we've got a bunch of places where what I would say, and it's beautiful to say this as we come into the Passover season, this is a moment where we've got some atonement that would be really good to do. There's some reflection, and there's some repentance, and there's some reconciliation that a lot of us need to have to say, let's clean up our house and make sure that we've addressed what causes the problem. And that's half of the equation, because the other half of the equation is the problem is really there.
Yeah.
This is where I want to get to the second half of your question, because you can't do it because of California, you can't do it because of, that's a convenient excuse for inactivity, and it's exactly where I started this conversation. That is not at all apostolic. That's messianic. That's waiting for someone else to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, here's a funny little story. It doesn't belong in this conversation, but it's a great story. When Kennedy said, we're going to send a man to the moon, okay?
Yeah.
He did not know that by total direct economic benefit, the most valuable thing he was going to have created was Gatorade. Now you heard exactly
I wasn't
what
expecting that, Doc.
No, you and no one else. But listen to what happened. Tang, which is the flavored beverage that you'd use for recycled water, and by the way, in space, recycled water, you can imagine where that recycled water is coming from.
Yeah.
It ain't coming from you know, the Culligan man, let's just say that. Um, you know, that flavored water became what ultimately the universities in Florida turned into what became Gatorade, right? The entire, I think it's $38 billion a year sports drink industry, which is way more than the direct cost of all the satellites that are put up every year. There's more Gatorade sold on Earth than there are satellites in air. And that's what we got out of the moonshot. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is I don't know if Piece of Heaven, in its current design, in its current path, with the current property, I don't know whether that is the right thing with capital R, capital T, the right thing. What I do know is that by boldly declaring we are going to do this, just like Kennedy said, we are going to go to the moon.
Yeah.
On the way to that journey, I can guarantee you good fruit will be born.
Yeah.
Because here's the point. Is it the right place? I don't know. Is it the right price? I don't know. There's a whole lot of things I don't know. I think your idea is great. I think the model's great. I think there's a lot of things about it that are great. And I think the fact of the matter is, if anybody's going to solve this problem, what people don't know about the Church of Glad Tidings is what you guys did in the face of the whole abortion, unwanted child situation. And most people don't know this, but they need to know it, which is when you guys decided, hey, it's not enough to just go something's wrong. We've got to do something about making it right. And what you guys did with taking children that were born for inmate women, right? And you figured out a way to mentor the mothers so that they could be mothers when they came out. People in the church took care of the children, and you brought the family together, and you actually showed what it meant to honor life, right? How many people who say they're pro-life refuse to help the infant and the orphan?
Right.
People who are pro-life
Awesome.
refuse to help the mother who's struggling. How many people who are pro-life are proving with every action that they take that they don't care about life at all?
Right.
Right?
Right.
You guys at Church of Heaven built a community that said, don't say something is wrong before you've shown what is right.
There you go.
I love that about the Church of Glad Tidings. Kim and I talk about that 9 times out of 10 when we talk about how amazing the church is. And we talk about it because you have credentialed yourself as a community of going, we're not going to say there's a problem. We're going to say, here's what we're doing for this problem. And what that does is, back to my earlier point, it's the apostolic prophetic role of saying, if we're solving this problem this way, you could solve another problem this way. Now,
Right. Exactly.
is Peace of Heaven something that Dave Bryan and Cheryl Bryan are certified child, post-conflict, post-abuse survivor counselors as certified by whoever? No. But is the community of Church of Glad Tidings the proven body of Christ evidencing a doing of the gospel to those who are naked and needing clothing? Yes, because that's how the church even started. It started with naked people. So guess what? You got it. Have I given food to the hungry? You bet. Have I put, have I helped cure the sick? You bet. The fact of the matter is, the person who says, yes, but you're not credentialed, or yes, but it's too hard in California, what they're doing, Dave, is they're denying the evidence of the work that you guys have done. And as a result of that, they're evidencing not just a callousness for the mission, but they're also evidencing an ignorance for what it takes to get things done. Because to get things done, you have to prove that you've done it. Not that you might have a way to do it if this and that and the other thing happens. Because I'll tell you what, if that property doesn't happen, I still know that abused children and trafficked children are going to be ministered to by and at the Church of Glad Tidings. I know that's going to happen. So if it comes in the form that we think we want it to come in, great. But if it comes in a different form, it is equally great, because the work that is being called for in our time is not a real estate improvement deal.
Right.
The work that is being done in our time is for people to get off their butts and help kids who are currently being neglected and abused and harmed. And that's the work.
Yeah, that is
So
the work.
I answered that way too long, but
No,
that's
I
that's I
appreciate it.
think an important thing.
You've probably been here enough to, at some point, have heard me say that one of our mottos is ready, fire, aim.
Yeah,
And, of course, my dad was a marksman and a gunsmith. And yet the reason we use that is because most of the world sets back and aims themselves into the grave without ever
yeah,
squeezing off a shot, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so our feeling, of course, our motto is find a need and meet it, find a hurt and heal it. But if you move in that direction, hopefully, wisdom, um, it it counsels other wise sources and
exactly,
improves as it goes. It's not that
exactly.
it's not that you start out with this is perfect, therefore we will act. It's like this is a good cause. Let's move toward it and have
Yeah,
the integrity to make flight adjustments as we go along.
exactly right.
So yeah, we've had a lot of experience having people say that won't work, but we're not doing anything.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I appreciate your input and your words of wisdom. I always appreciate what you have to share. And the one of the significant things that we're doing right now, David, is we're connecting with everybody that I know that is trying to help in this problem.
Yeah.
And we're saying none of us is as good as all of us. Let's work
Yeah.
together.
That's exactly right.
What are you doing that we can learn from? Or is there anything we're doing that you can learn from? What is it like when we consider the cumulative effect of us all doing something,
Correct.
each after their own style, so to speak?
Yeah.
But we've really put together a great board. We've got people from coast to coast. Troy Brewer, I don't know if you know Troy, David, but
I don't.
Troy Brewer Ministries, they've saved 11,200 kids. None of them in the United States.
Yeah.
All of them in South America, the islands, and Mexico. And I called him. I said, "Hey, Troy, when I think of child rescue, you're the old timer. You're
Yeah.
the guy that has pioneered the way." And he said, "I heard what you're doing." He said, "I'd love to help you," because he said, frankly, it's good to see somebody that has the courage to try something like this in the United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, Troy, the deal is I live in the United States." And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
there are kids that are being raped to death. Of
Yeah.
course, I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
And so he's on the board. Mary Flynn O'Neill's on the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Doug Frank's on the board. But again, if we can get like-minded people together, and then embrace this challenge and learn as we go, like you said, who knows what it will wind up
Yeah.
being. But I'll tell you this, we're going to wind up being a lot further ahead than just sitting around reminiscing about all the things that we think wouldn't have worked. And
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
that's
Well,
what it
and I
seems
mean,
like a lot of people spend their time doing.
that is
And
exactly right.
and I'm interested too in the idea. You and I have talked some about this, but I'm a believer in the kingdom of God, and that we should live our lives out of conscience before God.
Yeah.
So the state may or may not fit into that.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, let's take, for instance, you were the Robin Hood of the COVID con. God,
Yeah.
really used your hard work to open people's eyes, and I think what you did for the world is just sensational, and we all commend you for that. Um, and yet, here in California, I wouldn't have been a player at all. I would have never met you. I'd have never
Yep.
called you because I'd have just thought, well, whatever that man's doing doesn't work in California, because in
Yep.
California we need to mask up and not have any church meetings, right?
Yep.
Not
Yep.
visit our family. Uh, and so I think that we're about to again have an experience where we will find ourselves locking horns with bureaucracy, and somebody's got to say, we're proud to do it because that bureaucracy doesn't work,
Yep.
or uh, work or not, it's immoral. It's
Yep.
immoral
That's
government.
exactly right. Yep.
And we are not going to submit to immoral government. So
Yeah.
now that takes us into the next chapter. Okay, now you say we have to mask up. I say we don't.
Yeah.
Now let's throw down and get it on and see what happens. And that becomes a catalyst for society, uh, for societal improvement.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I know you've had, of course, much more experience than I have in government and in shaking things up. Being that being the wobble effect.
Yeah.
A good
Yeah. A
friend of
little
mine
bit.
wrote an article called "The
Yeah.
Wobble Effect."
Yeah.
But anyway, what think you of that in terms of what's likely to happen in California when we start rescuing kids from the
This
Child
the
Protective Services?
the state bureaucratic service. Here's the thing. Um, I think we once again. I'm just going to go for some accountability. We
Yeah,
have this render to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's, and I think we have decided that anything that Caesar says is Caesar's is, and I think that's a mistake.
yes,
I think Caesar got a long, long arm and started reaching around a whole bunch of stuff that's not Caesar.
right.
And I think a lot of what he reached around was stuff that the church abdicated its responsibility to
Absolutely,
actually
David.
take care of. Because last time I read the book of
Absolutely.
Acts, we wouldn't have Social Security if the church did its job. We wouldn't have
Absolutely.
Medicaid if the church did its job. So we're living, and by the way, I know it feels like I'm punching people a little bit in the guts, but we got to wake up to the fact that just because the state is doing a thing doesn't mean that should have happened.
Right.
If the people of conscience, if the people of faith, if the people of the kingdom had done their job, we would not have a
Absolutely.
huge number of the bureaucracies we have. So let's start with, once again, some repentance, some on your knees time, and then some how do we
Come
get
on,
this done
David.
right. So that's part one. But part
Preach
two
it,
is
David. Preach it.
but part two is equally important, right? Because the number of times I've been told that there is somebody out there that's, well, they're the all powerful state and they're the all powerful whatever. Listen, the Archbishop in Sydney, who told me that he was all powerful, also is the first Archbishop and ultimately Cardinal who went to jail for child sex abuse problems.
Wow.
Now, he was all powerful, wasn't he?
Well,
Well, sure thought so.
yeah, he
When the
thought
heat
so.
got hot, in Australia, he bugged out to the Vatican and tried to hide behind the Pope's skirts. And you can do that. And guess what? You can be found there too.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can
Be
then be
sure
hauled
your
back,
sin will find you out.
and you can find yourself being tried and convicted and put in jail.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, the number of people who told me, "Oh, you should not, no, that's the all powerful church. You should not involve yourself with that." And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, okay, here's a tiny problem. There's some people that I love a lot in this case in Papua New Guinea, who have been taken advantage of by these people. And I'm just not going to let that happen.
Come on, David.
And I remember a meeting with the archdiocese where I told them what I was going to do and what I was going to disclose and to whom it was going to be disclosed. And at the end of it, one of the very senior leadership of the church said, I think you're more like Jesus than any of us are. And I looked at him without missing a beat and I said, don't you dare denigrate Jesus's principles. I'm not doing what Jesus would have done. I'm doing what an average, miserable, secular human should know is right and wrong. If Jesus is our standard, we'd have a much higher standard.
Oh,
I'm
boy.
just saying, what you're doing, I could go into a bar in Las Vegas and have a hand vote, and every drunk person in that bar would agree
Come on,
that what
David.
I'm doing is just the right thing to do. So don't blame Jesus as somehow the high standard that I'm representing. Now,
Right.
I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the accusation, but I'm saying I shouldn't have heard it from the people I heard it from.
Right.
And
Beautiful.
what I
Well said,
know,
David.
what I know is that we're in a situation where if we had not abdicated our responsibility, we wouldn't have the bureaucracies we have. So we've got two things that we have to do. Number one, take responsibility. I am currently working with a beautiful human being right now on a private solution to Medicaid for 93 million Americans.
Beautiful.
A way that the private sector can do what both the church and the bureaucracy failed to do. Now, here's the thing. Are we going to succeed? No idea, Dave. No idea. But you know what we're doing? We're taking the shot. And like I said about the moonshot, along the way, we might get Tang and we might get Gatorade, but at least I'm going to get something along the way because I'm taking the shot.
Yeah, right.
Every single bureaucracy that we think could stand in the way, I've got some really, 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 really great news. By 2027 and 2028, these bureaucracies are going to fail. Why? Because the economy of the socialist experiment of the 1930s, when Roosevelt did the New Deal, has come to an end. That social experiment is over. That socialist experiment is over. And all of the socialist programs that said there's going to be this all-powerful government that's going to look after you, the poor, pathetic little citizen, that world ends when it runs out of money. And it's running out of money two ways. The first way it's running out of money is we've got a debt we can't pay for. So the great news is the largest federal expenditure now is paying the credit card bill for our vendors over the last 30 years. So that's a heroic thing to do. It's the largest budget item. We spend more paying for our interest on our national debt than we pay to defend our country.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Now, that's disgusting. And the great news is that has a limit on it. The limit runs out.
Yeah.
The second thing is the Social Security trust funds that are the things that we use to kind of tap into to pay for all these socialist programs runs out of money, literally runs out of money in the early 2030s. But if they fair valued their treasury holdings, runs out of money in 2028. So 17% of the entire economy of the United States ceases to exist in 2028. And that's little things like healthcare, food stamps, little things like, you know, housing subsidies, all that kind of stuff. Gone, not diminished, gone in 2 years.
Wow.
So let's just play a little game. Do we want to watch as the chaos ensues, as the world falls apart? And are we going to sit back going, tisk, 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 tisk? Somebody should have done something. Or are we going to view this as a prophetic opportunity to start doing stuff? What is the stuff we're doing? I don't know. How about feeding your neighbor? How about clothing the homeless? How about doing whatever you do? Whatever you do, start doing some of that. Why? Because in a couple of years, you better be good at it.
Yeah.
Martin Armstrong has a forecast. You know Martin Armstrong, I think, some of his work. He's a big data cruncher and a big data forecaster. Martin Armstrong has forecast that we could literally have the division of the United States into 4 or 5 different countries in the next few years.
Wow.
Now, I can tell you that, Texas already thinks it is a different country.
That's true.
I think New York City thinks it is the only country.
Yeah.
I think Southern California wouldn't know a country if it bit it in the butt. But,
Yeah.
you know, but, if he's right, great. If he's wrong, it doesn't matter. What he's saying is that the systems that we know are coming apart at the seams.
Yeah.
And what I would say is at that moment, rejoice.
Yeah.
And when
You
the
see
next
all
sentence
these
that
things
comes,
coming to
the
pass,
next sentence that
rejoice.
comes, the next sentence that comes, we've decided is eschatological, meaning that it's about the end time.
Yeah.
But remember that there's another way to interpret the exact same verse. When it says, rejoice because your redemption draweth nigh, that may mean an eschatology endpoint, but it also may mean you'll stop letting other people do the job you should have been doing. And your redemption is to step back into your divine purpose, to do
Right.
your divine thing and get off your butt and make a difference. And that may be as important as the eschatological, guessing game that people like to throw up there telling me when this or that or the other thing's going to happen.
Exactly.
And listen, I don't guess dates and times for a good reason. There aren't many commands that Jesus gave, but one of them was don't guess dates and times. So guess what?
Oh, there's that.
There's the little instruction like, I wonder if he meant don't guess dates and time.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't tell us to do many things. He really didn't. He actually, follow me and don't guess dates and times, right?
Right.
So there aren't a lot of things beyond that. So if you're told not to do it, I don't know, let's go out on a wild Dave Martin limb and say, let's not do it.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm saying that when we see that term, your redemption draws nigh, it could equally mean you will be reunited with the purpose for which you were divinely ordained on this planet to be part of the body that is supposed to be getting things done. And that may be as important as any futuristic, when's this or that or the other thing coming. And I'm not diminishing the eschatological argument. I'm simply saying we need to hold open the possibility that our redemption is us stepping back into our divine purpose in purity and in integrity and in fellowship with others who are doing the same thing. And I'm the first to tell you, you know this, David, and the last year you and Cheryl have been very supportive in helping me root out some of the darkness in my life. You know that it's there and you know that I worked on it. I'm not saying that I've got all this stuff figured out at all. What I'm saying is I diligently work out my daily redemption, my daily alignment with my created purpose. And we can all do that, and we can all be more effective if we do.
Come on, David. Well, that's one of the many things I admire you for. I love you. You've been a true friend. And just in retrospect, as we've been talking through what we've talked through today, I was reminded that Christ said while he was on earth, I'm the light of the world, follow my example. But he did say, when I am gone, you are the light of the world.
Yeah.
And so, people got the first part, but not so much the second part. So
and I had this conversation just a few hours ago with another group I was talking to. I said, last time I checked, Jesus told his disciples that you're going to do all the miracles you've seen me do. And then he added, and greater things.
Right. Exactly.
And I grew up in a world, and I know you grew up in a world where Jesus was held out as the high water mark.
Right.
And Jesus himself said,
himself,
I am the floor, and you will do greater things. And here's the point. He didn't say that to get us egoically incentivized, because the work he did was not for his ego. The work he did was for the suffering and for the oppressed and for all the people that he wanted to touch their lives. And And he told us that we will do even greater things.
Yeah. Wow.
So here's an idea. Let's at least listen.
And
Let's
have the
at least,
courage to try a few things,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah, you know,
Right.
and, maybe it's not walking on water, but who knows? Maybe it's walking on clouds. I don't know.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
But the point is, I'm simply saying we need to have, Paul talks about the difference between milk and meat.
Yeah.
There's a time when you kind of are suckling on the bottle and it's
Right.
just
Right.
and then there's the day when it's solid food time.
Right.
Well, I'd say we're at the hardtack phase now. This ain't solid food. This is jerky. And if I were advising the Paul's writings, I'd say, so there's milk, and then there's the solid food, and then there's the jerky time. And
Yeah.
the jerky time is when things are tough, right?
Yeah.
When you don't necessarily enjoy having the jerky stick for the third day in a row,
Right.
and you hate
Yeah.
that it's stuck between your teeth, and you don't know whether you're ever going to get it flossed out or you're going to lose a tooth because of it.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is, that's where we are right now. This is jerky time. This is the hard time where we have to start growing up a lot. We start having to look at the things where we thought that having the fast food drive faith, which is, I'm going to drive through the drive-through, I'm going to get my, fillet of fish and my loaves of bread, and then I'm going to drive on. That phase happened. That's not where we are anymore.
Yeah.
This is time to reignite the pioneer spirit that's inside of all of us that says, trim your lantern, get
Come
out
on.
there and get things done. And that's
Come
what
on.
time it is. And so
Yeah.
it's probably more jerky than, caviar, but who cares? It's time to get out there and get things done.
Yeah, it is. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up, David, but I
Yeah.
really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I'm thrilled to hear how RASA Energy is going. And always, it's a pleasure to talk to you and to hear from you. Just a review for everybody that is listening. In terms of addressing a problem, we have to admit to the things that were really self-imposed, things that we wouldn't have those problems if we hadn't defaulted and
Yep.
faltered along the way. There's certainly a lot of that when we look at the social services in the United States. I think that it's futile to criticize the state for doing what a state was never meant to do.
Exactly.
And so anyway, we got to start there. Thank you for bringing that up, David. But the point that we want to make today is when you're all done admitting to the problem, you've got to get off your butt, trust God to help you, and go out and try to do something. You
Yeah.
can learn as you go, but you need to be going. And
Yeah.
so wherever you're at, I hope you're involved in the processes. Don't sit back and criticize others for not doing it perfectly when you're not willing to do anything at all. And remember this motto and why we say it: ready, fire, aim. Get out and do something. And learn from your mistakes, learn from others that are wiser than you and have more experience than you do. But whatever you do, don't be passive. Because the time of passivity is over. It yielded bad fruit, and this
Yeah.
is a day where it's time to roar. So thanks for joining us here in Yuba City. Dr. Martin, thank you for being here with us. And as always, thank you for your enlightening conversation. And I want to thank you personally for your friendship, which has been dear to me.
One of the most cherished things on earth, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend. God bless you all.